Okay, as Allison just explained to us, yesterday was a dark day for democracy in North Carolina. The state Republican, I guess it's called the state Supreme Court technically, ruled against us, against democracy. They voted to restore the voter ID law that was passed in 2018. Now one of the things you have to remember about the voter ID law is it was a solution developed for a problem that doesn't exist. The whole idea of fraud in elections was invented around the year 2000, and they started working on it saying we have to have voter ID, we have to have voter ID because we have all this fraud. They never found any fraud. They never found any fraud. They still haven't found any fraud. A few people make mistakes in the election process. We've had Ken, who's one of our people on the Board of Elections here, explain to us that whole process. We don't have any fraud. However, they restored that voter ID law, and the whole rationale behind it was if we can scare off maybe 1% or possibly 2% of potential voters, preferably if they are black or brown or don't understand or college students, we can win in battleground states. That was the rationale for it. That's when it was put together, and they have done it for the last 20-some years. And so now here we have it back in play here in North Carolina. We also lost yesterday, we as in people who believe in democracy, the court as an instrument to put reins on a legislature that runs amok when it comes to gerrymandering. And that was thrown out yesterday, so the legislature can now go back to gerrymandering to their heart's delight. And that is tragic for us. When we had an even field for the congressional elections this last time, we had 7 and 7, elected here in North Carolina. The old way, I think it was 10 and 3 or 9 and 4, and when they get done doing it again, it'll probably be back to that, which will knock people out of Congress who could legitimately represent voters here in North Carolina. And of course, the opportunity for felons, once they're released from prison, before they finish all of their probation time, but they are released from prison, no, they can't vote. We can't let them vote. They have to pay up all their past dues. Well, if they've been in prison, they haven't been earning money, so that effectively keeps them from voting for a significant period of time also. It was a disastrous report. Fortunately, we have people on the Supreme Court, Anita Earls and Mike Morgan, who wrote scathing responses to what they did. Now, this talk got scheduled and mentioned as it was having something to do with history and hope. Now, I think you all need to know, and if you don't, you better, that when somebody writes a history or tells the story, they all come from a particular slant. You can't not have your own slant, no matter how hard you try to work on being objective. And we have some, professional historians here, but they can tell you that the very things that you look at are shaped by the lens through which you look at them. So as I talk about history today, just keep in mind, I'm biased. But let me tell you how I'm biased. I'm biased for the little guy. I'm biased for the little guy because I was the little guy in my family growing up. I have a older brother who's 4 years older than I am. And boys get together and they fight. Well, he was 4 years older, so he always won. So I was the little guy. And I know what it's like to be the little guy and lose. Even if you're right. But that has given me a bunch of insight into knowing that power does not give the right to use power. Power has the responsibility to have self-discipline. Secondly, when we talk about history, we have to talk about the whole story, everything that's going on. And we can't, just erase out things that we don't like. I happen to be a pastor, yeah, but let me tell you, the people who want to be, this new Christian nationalism stuff, they want to put the Bible to work, but they want to cut out anything dealing with the worst practices of a racist society and slavery and all that kind of stuff. Can't do any of that. Wait a minute, let's look at the Bible. The Bible tells the story of King David. King David got the hots for this beautiful, yeah, right, okay, he got the hots for this beautiful woman, and so he said, you can come here and stay with me. Oh, okay, they did that. Oh, she winds up pregnant. Well, her husband's off at war. One of David's, generals. He wasn't even Jewish, but so David said, I think I can take care of this. I'll give him leave of absence so he'll come home, and then nobody will ever know that he wasn't the father, etc. But the rules of the day said if you were involved in battle, a holy war, you couldn't, become involved, sexually with your spouse. Oh, okay. So this guy followed the rules, which really put David up a tree, and so my goodness, word's going to get out that my general and I messed with his wife, etc. So what did he do? He sent that general to the most difficult part of the battle where he knew that his troops were going to lose, so this guy would be killed. That's called a cover-up. That's the story that's in the Bible about this great leader, King David. But the Bible isn't afraid to talk about the real history, including the whole thing. He was a good guy, but he could also be a bad guy. I come out of Lutheran tradition, we call that sinner and saint at the same time. So be careful. Be careful when you hear somebody talking about history, make sure they're telling the whole story. I believe in telling the whole story, and I believe that in spite of some of these awful things that have happened in our history, the past shapes our present, yes, but does not determine what's going to happen. But we must know our history, or we are doomed to repeat it. Yeah, but we have to pay attention to who's telling the story, how they're editing it. Now, maybe some of you know something about the lost cause. This whole glorification of the southern side of the war, which was that was called the War of Northern Aggression. Oh, I learned that when I moved down here. And anyhow, let's remember that it was United Daughters of the Confederacy which saw to it that any book talking about that period in history that didn't agree with the lost cause perspective on it had to be removed from the public libraries. I think that's called working for indoctrination. And now some of those same people out of that mindset are saying we have to keep any talk of some of this awful stuff in our history. We have to ban those books. Come on, give me a break. But in spite of all of this, we can tell the history. We can know what's going on. We can pay attention to, yes, even ourselves when we let down the good values and ideals that we have. But that's being honest with ourselves as well. I told you I was biased. Yes, I'm also biased for the poor. I know what it's like to be poor. We grew up poor. Not everybody comes from a farm in Wisconsin came from a rich dairy farm. We didn't. There were about 20 cows. Half of them didn't give milk. 3 of them gave it once in a while. And that's why I learned how to do this, when I was a little boy. Okay. But how do you get out of that kind of problem? You get out of that problem by education. When I graduated from 8th grade, they had somebody, who was the top of the class. Well, there were 8 in the class. Give the speech at graduation. Yeah, I remember that speech. I was looking for it the other day. It's someplace hidden in some dusty boxes up in our attic. But my graduation speech at that time was the importance of public education. Well, I think I was 13 at the time. So it's been a long time since then, but I'm still a strong advocate of public education, because public education is what can help us get out of some of those traps. Now, North Carolina, there's been a push for public education for a long time. In 1816, I talk about learning something about history. I've studied history since I got here because I didn't grow up here. I didn't learn the stuff along the way. In 1816, there was a guy, a fellow named Lutzy, wrote a book about it, and included this anecdote. This guy was concerned about what North Carolina needed. So he traveled the state, 1816, 1817, 1818, came to the conclusion that what North Carolina needed was education, communication, and transportation. And he took together all these proposals to the state legislature in 1819. Okay, he got there, and what did they say? We don't have any money. Have we heard that before? That's over 200 years ago. And what's the excuse? We don't have the money to do it. But recently, in the more recent versions of the state constitution, what does the state constitution say here about public education? Well, section 9, or Article 9, section 2, it says that the General Assembly shall provide by taxation and other incomes, which shall be maintained, a uniform system of free public schools, which shall be maintained at least 9 months in every year, and wherein equal opportunity shall be provided for all students. That's the basis of the Leandro case, which has been going on for 26, 28 years, and they're still trying to get the state legislature to come through with enough money so that that promise has been fulfilled. The other thing that's in section 6 of the state school fund says that the state, in collecting all of that money, the money shall be set aside for that purpose, faithfully appropriated, and used exclusively, this is tax money, used exclusively for establishing and maintaining a uniform system of free public schools. Exclusively. And what are they doing at the present moment? Advocating $300 million for vouchers for private education. The Constitution says, know your Constitution. Where are these constitutionalists? Oh, by the way, that section on education in the state constitution also talks about provide the benefits of University of North Carolina and other public institutions as far as practical be extended to all people of the state free of expense. Did you know? Read your Constitution. This is the North Carolina Constitution. I came from Wisconsin, but their mouths are open over here. Oh, okay. Insofar as practicable is in the Constitution. So they say it's not practical to pay for it. Oh, okay. By the way, Thursday night at the Smart Start, the banquet that they had here at the depot the other night, Jason Walzer at the end of it said that the money subsidizing preschool education is going to run out in December. We know how important preschool education is, grade, years 1 through 5. The money supporting it from the state is going to run out at the end of December. Call Harry, call Carl, tell him what you think. That's stupid. Oh, okay, I already mentioned the vouchers for K through 12 education. So this is a concentrated attack on public education. And who's involved in public education? Teachers. Well, we can't increase those salaries to keep up with inflation. Oh no, no. Well, we can't provide the monies necessary for the program needs of schools. I don't know if we can do that. To talk to our Board of Education people. But where's Alyssa? She was here. Alyssa, what was here earlier this morning?
You mean Alicia?
Alicia.
I knew that.
And the hands of our school boards are tied here in North Carolina. Because in 1930, when they did the revision of the whole tax structure in the state of North Carolina, they changed it so that the school board cannot issue bond issues to raise money for their local schools. It all comes from the state. That's why the state legislature says what the teacher salaries are going to be in all of our schools. Oh, but that's understanding history. And as I read this history, as I learn this history, I'm not going to give up hope. I'm still here. You're still here. We're still here because we're not going to give up on that. Okay. As we talk about knowing this heritage, I've heard people since I've been here, well, the whole heritage of the South is that we must revere, the flag and the Confederate history and all that kind of stuff. Because we have such deep roots. Well, I have deep roots here in North Carolina too. I didn't realize how deep they are here in Salisbury till my sister-in-law sent us an email saying, did you know that one of the Hoy relatives back about 4 generations. He's buried in one of those unmarked graves. He died in the Confederate prison here in April of 1865. Yes, I have deep roots here at Salisbury too. Yeah. But still we hope and we move on. And all the disastrous stuff, in relation to women and women's health that's being pressed upon us now. Now let's be clear. This isn't just a recent thing. Any woman in this room can tell you that. But let's take it back to 1630. 1630 in the Williamsburg colony. And at that time, English law said that the status and money of the father of a child would relate down to any of that man's offspring. Well, they started realizing that there was a problem when they were making babies with their black women slaves, which, if they followed English law, would have said that the man's title, whether he was Lord so-and-so or whether he was just a rich guy in the community, all of his inheritance would go to his offspring. That's called patrilinear, inheritance kind of stuff. So in 1662, the Virginia House of Burgesses passed a law to say the children born of a bondswoman or free take on the status of the mother. Not only control of the woman's reproductive system, but the profit to be made if you made babies every 2 years out of your slaves. Talk about control of women, all the way down to the very present, the control of reproductive rights. And we can't let women make decisions about that, because somehow women don't have the same kind of intelligence or ability to make decisions as men. I don't happen to believe that. And in spite of all this stuff that's going on, I maintain a whole sense of hope that we can do something about it. We can change some of these things. Is it going to be easy? No, it's not going to be easy. But that's why we're here. We're here to do those kinds of things. And voting has something to do with that. Voting, we were just told about the importance of voting and voting for judges. Voting for judges. Remember, Sherry Beasley lost by 401 votes of the entire state of North Carolina. Oh yes, there's been backlash every time there have been steps forward in these processes. And in 1965, the Voting Rights Act was passed after all the brutality crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge. I don't know if you noticed the t-shirt that I'm wearing. This is a picture of the Edmund Pettus Bridge. We were there on a trip this last October, September, October. And just moving to be at that place, to see where they were beaten. And to know that coming out of that beating came the Voting Rights Act of 1965. There's horror, but there's also possibility. And we're not going to give up hope. One of the things that we have to face, though, is dealing with the sense of, my vote doesn't count. I'm powerless. It doesn't make any difference if I vote or if I don't vote. That's believing the lie of the people who want to keep the status quo or reverse the status quo. Go back to the good old days. Well, let me tell you about the good old days. I remember the 1940s and the early 1950s. I remember washing the globes on those kerosene lamps because we didn't have electricity in that house. And I remember how cold it was in Wisconsin going to the outdoor potty as a little boy when it was 20 below zero. Yes, tell me about the good old days. And the fear of getting polio before the vaccines. Oh, now we have to be afraid of the good vaccines to help protect us. This is strange. Don't tell me about the good old days. Don't tell me about. We can't accept the lie that we are powerless and that it doesn't matter, and that Rowan County currently is so much more red and not enough blue. We can't let that lie detract from who we are and what we are called to do. We can't let the lie of the white supremacists sink into the brains of young black voters to say, you don't have any power anyway, so why should you vote? That's a tactic. That's a tactic. Let's not fall for that kind of trap. Rather, let's move forward with hope, with possibility. Are we up against the challenges? Are we up against the problems? Of course. but every time Alyssa's out there setting up another demonstration downtown, for women's rights or against the stupidity of some of the lack of good gun regulation, one of my jobs is, or the job of the chair, we're having an election later, but the job of the chair is to be the spokesperson for the local Democratic Party, which I do, and I speak.
Yes, you do.
By the way, it's a long story, but I can also tell you the story of what it's like to be shot. I have a little bullet hole through my right thigh. Fortunately, it was superficial. It's a long story. We don't need to get into that. But I know what that's like. So when people talk about the need for sensible gun legislation, I'm all in. I'm all in, because I can tell you what it's like to be on the receiving end of one of those tiny little things. A bullet, it really isn't very big, but I know what it's like when it goes boom and hits you. So what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Well, let's be who we are, okay? What does it say we are as a Rowan County Democratic Party? The mission of the Rowan County Democratic Party is to promote the platform, candidates, and issues of the Democratic Party, specifically those that impact current residents. We advocate for the protection of voter rights, fair election districts, responsible, transparent government, economic and social equality. And we support quality public education for all children, safe and affordable housing, sustainable economic development, livable wages. And our last speaker, it's, two weeks ago, Saturday morning, for our breakfast, we have all these speakers come in. What do I have them talk about? Economic development, education. We had, Hannah was here, 2 weeks ago talking about housing and pointing out to us that we don't have a high enough earning level here to afford the housing that we have, much less, any of the new housing that is starting to develop and come in here. Livable wages, maybe $15 an hour, for 40 hours a week. That's roughly $30,000. That's not enough money to pay for the current going rate for a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment. So we have to have more income, and we need to remember that. We need to keep those statistics. We're also quality, accessible health care for everyone, including women, I would add, the preservation and protection of our environment and atmosphere. Well, that's who we are as Rowan County Democratic Party. What else do we are? Keep in mind, take a look around this room. Are the people sitting around you the people that you grew up with, or do they look a little different than the people that you grew up with? This is a pretty diverse crowd, It is. When I take a look around this room, I see there's some folks here that are pretty well-to-do. There's some other folks here that, well, they're very happy for that Social Security check that comes once a month, and that's about it. Okay? There also, as we look around the room, we are a diverse group. We really are. I celebrate that. I celebrate our diversity. I really do. We are the people, we are an inclusive community. Whoever walks through that door, we say welcome. It's one of the other roles that I play, to say welcome. We're glad you are here. Come on in. Women, men, LGBTQ plus, black, white, various religious groups. Believers, non-believers, poor, rich, in between. Being the community that we are. Keep in mind, just being this community where we understand we all are the same status as citizens of Rowan County. And inclusive, that's a threat to people who do not believe that is the way life should be. They believe in classes and castes, and you're better than if somebody else is lower than. I don't believe that. I don't believe that. Yes, we are inclusive, but we need to become more inclusive. That's always the challenge. Okay, so now, what are we going to do specifically? Okay, you all precinct people got elected at precinct meetings, or just came through the door this morning because you want to be involved in the importance of being Democrat here. What are the specific tasks? Voter registration. We have a whole lot of new people moving into this neighborhood, moving into this community, moving into this county. See to it that they are registered to vote. Those are jobs for precincts, okay? Precinct chairs, think, plan, get your people together and say, okay, we know where this new development is, or we just know where the new people have moved into the areas where we live, and we're going to go see that. We also need to, recruit good candidates to run for office. People of decency and honor and inclusivity. Okay, recruit them. And that means looking at each other. I remember a couple of years ago, I said, we really should have somebody running in all these offices. Lo and behold, so some people took me seriously. That's how Jean Dixon got her campaign going. There she is! She's on city council in Kannapolis. Okay, we do these things. We can have an influence upon each other. That's why we're here. We need to welcome the new residents coming into our communities. That's what the Franklin community. Where are you, Larry? Back there. Raise your hand, Larry. That precinct, the Franklin precinct, is organized now. And his neighbors, his Sandy and Simon, are pulling together folks in that community because they're a community. It's a development, a little development. They're pulling them together, welcoming, to develop relationships, to listen, and not just to each other, but to listen to some of the people that we disagree with. But if you listen to them, they might realize that, underneath all this hair that I have, there are not two little horns. There aren't. Some of you are bald, so they can't even see it if they look straight at you. Okay? Democrats don't have horns. We are not the devil. We are not evil. Okay? But we also need to stand up and speak. It isn't just me to stand up and speak. It's you need to stand up and speak as well. Speak for the issues that we hold dear. And bottom line, elect Democrats. Elect Democrats, elect Democrats. Now, is this possible? Is my whole spiel about saying that we can have hope in spite of all this stuff, is it real? Is it real for you? Okay, last night I was watching this guy on TV. He was talking about the disastrous decisions here from the Supreme Court of North Carolina. And he was asked, do you get discouraged? And he said, I do not have the luxury of being discouraged and giving up on hope. Okay? Let me hear you say it. I do not have the luxury to give up. I do not have the luxury to give up. Okay, we don't. We don't. And we are a people of hope. Many of us are people of faith. We celebrated Easter. That means, even out of death, new life can come. Okay, Democrats, let's be that new life, that real hope for Rowan County. Thank you very much.
Geoffrey,
Yeah.
the minutes.